Lowering your car. The question that you might be asking yourself, not necessarily should you do it, but how should you do it? There are also some other things that you'll want to consider when it comes to lowering your car because it's not just about the aesthetics that most of people will typically consider when it comes time to lowering their car. They typically just want to get rid of the wheel gap, improve the ride quality a little bit in terms of handling, because let's be honest, anytime that you lower the car, you are going to be sacrificing some of the comfortability that comes along with your car when it's brand new. So, if you plan to lower your car, one of the things to consider is that you're giving up some of the comfortability. Now, depending on your car's layout, what you want to do with it, that's perfectly fine. If you're going for a full-on track build, comfortability is not necessarily at the forefront of your mind. But if this is a daily, if this is something that you commute with other people, then you will want to consider, is it going to be comfortable when you lower it? And that's where kind of the debate of lowering springs versus coilovers come into play. But we'll jump into that in just a little bit. Because the other thing that you'll have to consider when it comes to lowering your car overall, doesn't matter which option that you go with, is your lip or your bumper. If you're in an area where the roads are really bad, if you have really steep driveways, if you go over a lot of speed bumps and you don't want to navigate like at an angle for those, or if no matter how hard you take the angle, you just can't get up that driveway without scraping, you might be sacrificing your lip. And if it's really bad, it could escalate all the way to your bumper. So another thing to consider is, I would say before you lower your car, or before you get your lip even, go ahead and lower your car. If you're scraping without a lip, then you might either want to go with a cheaper lip or just forego the lip entirely. Because there is a trade-off when it comes to getting rid of the wheel gap, but also not ruining your front lip. Usually the two don't go hand in hand. You either have to increase the wheel gap a little bit in order to save your lip, or you're going to have to sacrifice your lip in order to completely get rid of the wheel gap. Especially if this is a daily or sees any type of regular road use that isn't, let's say, track, or it's not on a pristine road even. I know that if you're trying to do this in California, there's no way that you're going to get away with a pristine lip on a lowered car. The roads here, they're just not good enough. I saw a statistic saying that California roads overall rank 5th worst in the entire United States, despite the fact that we probably pay the most when it comes to car registration. So obviously our money isn't going into the roads, and we also pay for things like express lanes. So if you're in California, definitely want to consider this. The other thing that I would say is more important than the lip, because you don't necessarily have to get a lip when you lower the car, or you can lower the car before you get the lip. The fender rolling, whether it be on the fender liner or the metal portion of the fender, this is more critical. One, because you're giving up some of the safeguards in the first picture here where you can see the blue bumper. This is where you're going to be giving up some of the protection that you would have. Depending on what car this is, you're either going to give up the protection to the auxiliary radiator or the oil cooler. So that's essentially what these fins are. This is what a lot of people who have the G80s right now are dealing with when they lower their car, and if they want to get wider wheels. This portion right here is something that they are dealing with, and so they either have to do a inner fender modification, or they can't do one or the other. They can't go too low or they can't go too wide. This is an issue that you'll definitely want to mock up, and why I usually would say lower your car and then see based off of the OEM wheels, because the springs or coilovers are typically designed and mocked up to use the OEM wheels. Based off of how low you want your car, you can test fit different wheels. Like you can go to a wheel shop and maybe they have a beat up wheel with the tire that you want on there, or the tire size that you want. Maybe you have a buddy who has a tire size you want. And even if they have a different car, as long as you can get like 2 bolts on to secure the wheel, during a test fit, that's fine. You're not driving on the car. You're just trying to see if you have enough clearance. And if you don't have enough clearance, say you lower the car, you buy the wheels that you want, you get the tires on, and it rubs, worse than this even, because eventually the plastic will just kind of, file itself out, or it will just kind of break off. And the metal, the coolers are metal, so they do have some protection, right? And then you could always like put something up right against it, like a little shield. Like you can makeshift something to protect that. The thing that's even harder is if you're rubbing against the metal portion of the fender here on the second picture that's highlighted in yellow, you will get some of that rubbing on your tire, and metal is a tougher material than rubber. So you will start to see some premature wear on your tire that could be a safety concern. If you're driving around, say like the first time you get them on and your car is lower, like maxed out low, it's not going to destroy your wheels right away to the point where you can't drive. It's probably going to be safe. Like if you get from the tire shop and then you go to work, it's probably going to be fine until you get home, and then you can raise it up and it'll be fine. But if you continue to drive on this, this is going to be a safety concern. So before you lower your car, make sure that if you have aftermarket wheels, that it will fit. And for this, I would say check out Apex Racing's or Apex Wheels website for your specific car's fitment. And then you can take those measurements and go to a website like Fitment Industries and see how it actually looks. On Fitment Industries website, you're not only going to be able to see how it looks, but people are going to say, yes, I need to roll my fenders. This is my coilover suspension. I lowered it this much. It's a little bit more like a forum thread where not every car is going to have their suspension, or if they had a fender roll, but they will have the basics like the tire size and the wheel size. So essentially, you'll go on Apex's website and you'll say, okay, this is what I think I want on my car. Let me see how it looks. And then on Fitment Industries website, maybe you get lucky and there's one or two people that have the suspension system that you have and the wheel and tire setup that you want. Those are the ones that you'll want to really examine under a microscope and say, okay, I'm willing to do the fender roll. Okay, I'm not really willing to have that much wheel gap, but at least all of that stuff is free and you don't have to sacrifice your wheels, your fenders, your tires, or your lowering setup at all before making the purchase. And when it comes to lowering your cars, we have essentially two options, right? We have lowering springs and we have coilovers. If I could do it all again, I would still get the coilovers. I would still get the camber plates. However, I would, just because I want to go with a wider wheel setup and a thicker tire setup, not necessarily that I want to go lower, but you reduce the wheel gap when you get a thicker tire. I would have done the Swift Spring upgrade right out of the gate. In the front, it makes sense. I just did the rear, so I'm still kind of on the fence with that. It feels a little bouncy right now. So maybe once they settle, it'll get better, or maybe I have too stiff of a spring rate in the rear. So I'm going to see how it plays out. The fronts, when I did them right away, it was an instant improvement. No more rubbing, no matter how steep the driveway, no matter how bumpy the road. And it's probably right about the same static height. It might be like 0.1 of an inch higher, just so that I have a little bit more clearance. I could lower it a little bit. I'm just going to see how the rears turn out before I start really adjusting everything. And I do want to give the fronts a little bit more time to kind of settle in, but I absolutely enjoy the ride quality. I love that I'm not really having issues when it comes to speed bumps, bumpy roads, or driveways. So this is something that I really recommend. If you're considering this, I would say start with the fronts. The linear aspect of it makes the whole thing more predictable. You can just kind of escalate things like okay, it feels like this when I take this type of bump or a bump of this magnitude at this speed. If I go faster and I take that speed bump, I can probably expect it to feel like this. Or if I take a turn at a slower speed, I kind of know what to expect if I increase the speed. When it comes to the progressive springs that come on the coilover kits, they're really soft. And so that's what happens with the bouncy nature of it is it'll give a lot in the beginning to try to be comfortable. However, that introduces the potential to rub. That introduces the potential of that, like that floatiness where you kind of like just sink down into your car when you take that initial bump. It's more evident when you're going over something like railroad tracks than anything else from what I saw, because you know it has that unevenness of the terrain. The asphalt isn't even, and then you have the hard points of the tracks that really let you feel that progressive springs aren't necessarily the best thing in the world. You know, you'll hear a lot of people say that linear springs are tough. However, you just have to adjust the spring rate. On the M235i, the 8K springs in the front with the KW DDC, so I'm going to assume that's going to work for like V1, 2s, and 3s. It's a really good spring. It's a really good spring rate to daily. If it's a little bit tough, maybe you want to step it down a little bit, but you're going to have to adjust the length a little bit. For that, I would just recommend that you call Swift themselves, tell them what you want, and then use my car if you want as a reference point. But you know, if you want to test it out for yourself, you know, because if you do coilovers, it is quite a bit of an investment. So I would say, you know, test it out on yourself. On the 228i, I would say one of the reasons why it didn't have necessarily the rubbing issues on the V1s is one, it's a lot lighter in the front. It's a 4-cylinder versus a 6 when you go to the M235i. It doesn't have, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't have the extra oil. No, it either doesn't have the oil cooler, doesn't have the aux radiator. It doesn't have one of those, I believe. But essentially, it's a lighter car overall. So your potential of rubbing is significantly reduced, even with the same wheel and tire setup from car to car, even though the chassis is the same. The rear springs are fine. To a certain extent, I do prefer it. It's weird. Like the setup that I have now that, you know, I had the KW DDCs in there, you know, I ran them for about a year before I had any significant issues that caused me to say something along the lines of, yes, I do need to upgrade to the Swift springs. So this was my setup before. And then, you know, I went with the Swift springs. I also had to do some new camber plates in order to adapt the different inner diameter of the spring, because the KWs are designed to work with the OEM spring perch. When you go to something like a Swift, it's a 60 millimeter spring inner diameter, so you have to get the appropriate perch. And so this is the setup that I have now. It does require a helper spring in the front, and this is a pretty good setup. This is a 7-inch spring on the front, and I believe right now I have it set to just a hair underneath what KW recommends at 7.4 inches from the top of the spring perch to the pinch bolt. I believe I'm still within parameter of, oh no, I definitely am within parameter of the rears. And an install tip I would recommend is KW recommends that you measure from the outside. So basically where the spring makes contact with the adjuster to the top of the spring adapter here that touches the chassis. But obviously that's fine when it's out of the car, but once it's installed like this, you can't get that measurement. So what I would recommend is KW makes different ranges for the different models of their suspension. So figure out what the range is with the specs that KW recommends, but when you're within that range, take the spec of like the inner portion of the perch to the top portion of the spring adjuster. That way, when you have to measure it when it's on the car, you can stay within the KW specs, but just know that you're using a different measurement. You're using two different points. So the measured value will be smaller than what KW recommends because you're going inside. So that's just one thing, is before you install it, measure whatever is the max and the min that KW recommends from its recommendation points, but take it from the inside as well, and then just make a note in your instructions or put it on your phone, whatever. That way, when you need to make adjustments in the future, you can do that and have it stay within spec. The big thing that we want here is to make sure that the strut itself is compressing within its optimal range. We don't want it outside of that range because, one, if it's at the very top, if it's compressing very, very little, then it's going to be very uncomfortable. If you're bottoming out the strut and it's, like smashing the bump stop to shreds, then you're going to blow out your shocks. So the thing here is, when you're looking at the fronts, we are slightly below the KW recommendation. However, this is a much stiffer spring. So all things being equal, if we're taking up the same amount of space and we're at the same level with a stiffer spring, we should still be operating within the recommended range. It's hard to say with a progressive spring. You could do a little bit of math in order to kind of make sure that you're within the appropriate range. The rears are much easier. So the rears, we went to a 14K spring, and if I'm not mistaken, it was, let's look it up. So let's look up here. Oh, let's see why this isn't. There we go. I guess you guys has it figured out by now that I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan. Let's see here. So in the rears, we went to a let's see, I saw it here. Oh, here we go. So in the rear, we went to a 14 kg spring. And if I'm not mistaken, the rears before were like 600 something. So let's say a 12 kg spring. This is about how much the rear weighs on the corners, give or take. So you have to reference on forums how much your car weighs in each corner. And so in the rears, we're expecting a 1-inch drop versus this is about a 1.5 inch drop, give or take. So when it comes to this, that doesn't mean lower the perch 1/2 inch more. It just means that if you already had the KWs installed, go down like a few spins and then see what happens. So if, for example, I think like the safest thing to do is go down, like if you want it low, go down to whatever is the lowest recommendation. Because in the rears, what happened was, it's not like the fronts where we went from a 9-inch or a 9.25 inch spring to a 7-inch spring. The rears are very close in height. The difference in height is about a 1/2 inch, but that 1/2 inch is taken up by the helper spring. So to a certain extent, remember what I was saying is, under compression, we're going to go down 1/2 inch less from this spring, right? But if we're 1/2 inch taller because of the helper spring, even under compression, it's going to be close, right? It's a relative height. You can see that it's taller in its nature, but it also has more coil. So even when it's packed down, it's not going to be able to pack down as tight just because one, it's taller, and two, it has more coil. So the coils are going to bunch up sooner. So I would say if you're doing this, go down to whatever the lowest recommendation is. And it looked pretty fine. I'm still playing with it, so I don't really want to give out the final verdict just yet, but it looks very close to kind of what the car looked like before I put these springs on. Like the static height looks almost the same. It's the ride height and the variability in the ride height when you take uneven roads, speed bumps, driveways, all that stuff that's changed. So I would say lowering your car is good if you know what to expect. One is lower the car before you do the lip. You know, kind of take a mental note of, do you go over really steep driveways, a lot of speed bumps? Are the road conditions suitable for a lowered car? Do you transport people? Do you transport sensitive things? You know, like if you're maybe like if you do like DoorDash, or if you do like medical transports, things like that, maybe you don't necessarily want to lower your car all that much because you have sensitive materials in your car. And then from there, I would say lower the car first and then test fit different wheels and tires. It's much easier to test fit wheels and tires with a lowered car than getting the wheels and tires you want and test fitting suspension. So do the suspension first if your wheels and tires are good. That's usually my recommendation. If your wheels and tires can get you by for now, get the suspension that you want, and then upgrade your wheels and tires once you've gotten all your money's worth out of your current tire setup. So with that, we'll open it up for the Q&A. If you guys have any questions on this or anything else, feel free to fire away. Daily Shred. Definitely think I'm just going to go with the sport springs. Hopefully won't have too many issues. Yeah, there are some companies that do like even adjustable springs, like KW, AST just got in the game when it comes to the G80 stuff. H&R starting to do adjustable springs. I think another company is MMR. And some companies like MMR and KW, what they've done is they've actually made their springs, and you know, some will say it's too soft, it's not low enough. All of that is true. However, they design their springs to work with the OEM struts. So it's designed to work within the optimal range, because most of the time you'll hear people say, if you go with lowering springs, you're going to reduce the longevity of your OEM struts. And that's usually because they're lowering it to the point where the compression point, or the new compression range with the struts, is too low than what the OEM struts are optimized for. Therefore, they're more likely to have that premature wear, or they're going to wear out sooner. But, you know, KW, H&R in some cases, and I believe even AST, they're designed to work with the OEM strut in its optimal stroke range. Now, there are some trade-offs. I will say that if you look at something like the ASTs, they can get you really low. The trade-off in that is static height is low. However, you're probably going to be more subject to coil binding because they put so many coils in their spring. So it's hard to achieve all three things of, one, lowering the car, two, working within the optimal range, but also giving you decent stroke travel for comfortability. Usually they're giving up the stroke travel. So they're operating within so if this is the optimal range that your strut can travel, they are working within this parameter. However, they're working within this parameter. So they're working within a narrower range than what the optimal range is designed for. So your strut will still, last a very long time. However, it's going to be really uncomfortable because if you take a bump really hard, that coil bind, it's going to be right there and you're going to feel it. So that's one thing to consider with these adjustable springs is they achieve two things. They will lower your car, but you're going to be giving up some of the travel when it comes to your struts because they're designed to work within the optimal stroke range. So just be careful of that. I just did the comparison with the ASTs and the KWs. You have to evaluate what's more important to you. The KWs won't let you go as low. So in theory, you should have more stroke travel on the shock. The trade-off is if you're comparing it to the ASTs will go lower. However, you're going to give up more comfort. So if you want to lower the car a little bit and you want some of that comfort still, go with the KWs. If you're fine with a little bit of a harsher ride, maybe you have more pristine roads where you are, and you want to go lower static height, AST would be something that you want to go for those of you who are the G80 owners. So just be aware of that. Most of these companies have been around for a long time, so their spring technology is good. They usually give a lifetime warranty. All of that is fine. It's just, do you want more comfortability or do you want to go lower? When it comes to lowering spring kits that are using the OEM dampers, you really have to pick one. Car Snob, how's it going, man? I haven't seen you in a while. Just lowering springs, maybe. Yeah, I mean, some cars are perfectly fine for that. You know, if you want to retain the EDC, if you want to save a little bit of money, you know, you can make the case for lowering springs, right? It's not necessarily like coilovers are always the best. You know, if money was the same, like if they cost the same, I would say yes, coilovers, you know, all things being equal, will be better. Because, I mean, from my experience, lowering springs are harder to install. You know, if you're going to do coilovers, I usually recommend just do camber plates at the same time, because it's going to save you the hassle of having to get a spring compressor, switch over the top mount, and you're still using the OEM thrust bearing, and you can't make any camber adjustments. Usually if people go low, they want to get wider wheels, you're going to have to dial in some camber. Just get the camber plates with the coilovers if you plan to do that. But if you just want a nice little bit of lowering to reduce the wheel gap, you're probably going to stick with the OEM wheels. Lowering springs are perfectly fine. Elliot, I was looking forward to your message today. So let's see what we got here. I got my oil leak fixed at San Francisco BMW. Part of the job was covered by the Sulev, part wasn't. I got out of there for $1,450. Okay, if you don't mind, what wasn't covered? And how did they get to that $1,450? I'm going to assume that $300 of that is their inspection fee or an hour's worth of labor. If they did some work, they usually will waive the service fee of about $300. So at least $300 of this, I'm going to assume, is their time. But awesome. Yeah, I'm happy that it was covered. Yeah, if you don't mind, also what was covered by the Sulev. Anthony, hey, should I change my oil cooler O-rings if I'm changing my oil filter hasn't yet? Yeah, it's already out. Just do it. It's like just a couple bucks more. One slow 320. I just let my tires rub on the fender, but I'm slammed without camber plates. Okay. I mean, if you can, like a fender roller on Amazon's like $50. I mean, I would say like, yeah, I mean, if you can, I mean, another way to do it is like with control arms. Like if your control arms are due for a replacement, you can go with adjustable ones that will let you dial in camber. Yeah, I would say if you can, you know, roll the fenders, you know, just so that you're safe. That's the biggest thing when it comes to rubbing. Like the stuff on the inner fender, like Like that stuff will just go away. It's plastic, but if you eat up enough of your tires, it could be a safety concern. Elliot, they say I might need a timing chain guide and chain guide. They quoted me. Ooh. Hit up my buddies over at SV Bimmer. If you're in the area, you can tell them that I recommended you. Yeah. On the 4 cylinders, that's usually a concern. That is a true thing. However, you can try to like ask them for the service history of it. Some of the 4 cylinders were like, it's not like a full-on recall, but it's like a partial recall. Like if your car is under 70,000 miles, we'll replace the timing chain guide, no problem. That one's going to be car specific, and that's technically not under the SULEV. That's just a BMW thing. Some cars, if I'm not mistaken, the timing chain guide is covered by the SULEV warranty. That one it's like really car specific. So just you'll have to look into it a little bit. You could also ask the dealership to dig and find out if you're part of the recall or if the SULEV covers it, one of the two. If you're not covered by either, then I would say you can take it to my guys over at in Santa Clara if you're close by. The invoices in my car, I think the fee was waived. Okay, yeah, I would be surprised if they did any work on your car, charged you money, and didn't waive the service fee. But they're going to charge you for like an hour or two. Anthony, thanks. No problem. Happy to help. I rolled my fenders. Next thing, I'm going to get smaller front tires. Okay, yeah, that's a good option too. Yeah, if you're due, you could go with like a slightly stretched tire, and that'll work too. Like a 225/40 on an 8.5-inch wheel gives a little bit of stretch, and you don't need any camber on the 2 Series if you lower it. You can't get like super low, but you don't necessarily have to be at the maxed out height of your coilovers or your lowering spring adjusters as well. Elliot, I need to get the invoice out of my car. Give me your email and I'll email it to you. Elliot, it's just my first and last name. So Fritz Ramos at Gmail, or actually, you know what? Actually use that more for work. You use roomtuber at Gmail. That'll work. What do you think I can get a timing chain replaced for? I don't know. I haven't had to run the math on that, but if they gave you a quote and they timed like how many hours, you can usually subtract $100 to $150 per hour from whatever BMW quotes you. And that's usually what an independent shop would charge. If they're charging like $200 less, like $100 per hour, I'd be like, like those shops are fine for like oil changes and stuff. But when it comes to the timing chain guide, because they do have to time it, and everything afterwards, it does require a couple of specialty tools. This one I'm saying, like, don't go to like your general mechanic. BMW specialist is probably what you want here. You're going to want somebody with some like experience under their belt for this. So my thing is like, usually there are $300 mechanics. That's going to be your dealership stuff. You have $200, which are going to be the independent specialists, $100, and then you'll have like maybe $60 or $50 per hour. The $50, $60 an hour, that's going to be good for like your oil changes, your tire rotations, stuff that are very generic, superficial, maybe even like a fluid flush, like coolant or anything like that, brake fluid, stuff like that. That's fine. The $100 stuff is going to be like, maybe like your brakes, something where there's going to be coating involved. Maybe like you wanted to do an LCI headlight upgrade, or you did a taillight upgrade, or if you did something along the lines of a battery swap. The battery change is not itself difficult. you're really paying for the software that they're using to program it. Sometimes these $50, $60 guys, like they'll do the job, like they'll do the physical thing. They just won't code it to the car because they don't have something specific for BMW. Of course, with technology getting cheaper and cheaper, that's becoming less and less common. But usually that's what I've seen is if it's just something like just swap over the components, there's no real coding involved. You can do that for 50, 60. You can do that for a mechanic who charges $50, $60 an hour. $100 is when you start to need a little bit of coding involved. The $200 mechanic is where you want them to essentially do whatever a dealership can do, but at a lower price. And so there it is. I mean, for people who go to the dealership, like honestly, their mechanics are not $100 better than the specialists, right? In order to be called a specialist, there's a little bit more involved with that. What you're paying for the extra $100 at the dealership is the convenience, right? You just look up BMW dealership. It's easy. You can trust them. They'll back their work. You sit down, you hang out, you have coffee. They'll give you snacks and all the things. It's an air-conditioned lobby that you can wait in. Maybe they'll give you a rental. You're paying for the amenities. So hopefully, yeah, whatever they're charging you, if they give you a breakdown in hours, you can subtract maybe 100 per hour. I'm pretty sure they're charging 300 an hour. Jake, hey Fritz, sometimes when I hard accelerate my M235i in first gear, I have a whine that sounds like a supercharger. Any idea what that could be? A supercharger. Maybe if you have an open air filter, you can hear the turbo spooling. Maybe could be it. If it's only in first, I don't. I'd say run a scan tool on it and see. If you're running like any transmission tune, if it's a automatic, you'll want to look into that. I don't know if I have any of those issues with mine. I mean, you have that induction noise supercharger. Yeah, I mean, if you have like an open air filter, maybe that could be it. SV Bimmer. Let me see if I can pull them up here. Here we go. This is them. I will. Where's that share button? Ah. Oh, no, here they are. They have their own website. Here we go. Yeah. You can always give them a call to try to schedule something. It's not Sulev. You're right. Okay. Yeah, some cars are covered by that Sulev thing. Some cars aren't. It's, yeah. I don't know. I think if you go on, you can look up, type in Sulev Keys Motorsports on YouTube. In the description of his video, he has a link where it's like a full list of the cars based off of make, model, and year that are covered, like what's covered under the Sulev and what's not. It's weird. It's like it can vary from, you know, like some timing chains are covered, some aren't. But yeah, I hope that helps. MKD, how is it over the US with speed bumps? Over here in the EU, it becomes cumbersome driving really low. It depends. I mean, I wish there was like a speed bump machine where it's like all the speed bumps were uniform in their size, length, like everything. Like even in like my housing area, I have like 3 speed bumps that I have to cross over. And you would think that the one, like when you first get into the housing area, would be the lowest because everybody drives over it. It's going to kind of like, you know, wear out and everything. it's not exactly like that. Like out of the 3 that I have to go over, the second one is the most harsh. The first one is the second harsh, and the third one, it's like smooth. Like you can just cruise over it and like almost nothing's going to happen. So it's weird. It really depends on where you're at. But if you're from California, like if you're in the Bay Area, like Oakland and San Francisco is the worst. Not just because of the speed bump, because the roads are trash. Just call it what it is. Potholes everywhere. I think the potholes are the bigger concern than the speed bumps. So, yeah. Our, I won't go too much on a rant, but our politicians here have a habit of increasing taxes and not giving back to the community. Let's just say that. So that's my little PSA of like, be careful who you vote for. Just because you keep voting for the same people, they have no incentive to do anything for you. So, MKD, I'm scraping my lips unless I enter sideways slowly. And yeah, that's kind of the same thing. And here there's like one speed bump every few hundred meters in residential areas. It's like that here in California too. Yeah. And sometimes we have those weird, like, if sometimes we have them, they're like rubber speed bumps. So on you can call it like a 2-lane road where you have opposing traffic, there's like 4 speed bumps, 2 in each direction, and there's a little space in the middle. To me, those are the worst because they're like the highest, and it's really hard to get both tires on, and like have a good experience for your car. They're awful. Yeah, those are the worst ones, I would say. Scraped it like 15 minutes after. It's like, at least yours got 15 minutes. I mean, I installed mine, I pulled it out of the driveway, and right there. I think like Slip Low has like guards for that to make it easier to like you're gonna scrape, so at least it'll be on the guards, and it kind of helps reduce the friction, so it's easier to scrape off of. You're just gonna have to make sure that double-sided tape and your screws are on there pretty tight. And it's hard because you can't tighten down carbon fiber too tight because it'll crack, but tight enough. Elliot, okay, thanks. That makes sense. All right, yeah. Hope it helps. Like I said, just let them know that I recommended you, and maybe if you're there, if you see my car there, I'm probably there filming or hanging out or something. So maybe that'll be a chance for us to meet in person. I hope that, yeah, I hope that helps. I'll check my email for the invoice, and I think I might be there tomorrow even. So maybe I'll be able to ask them if they're not too busy. Jake, scanned it and no code. And mechanic said it was probably the turbo, but don't recall ever hearing it before. I don't know. Like, sounds are hard when you're not there in person. Like a whining noise. So, I mean, like the N55 is not usually prone to like timing chain issues, but if you hear that whine, like kind of sound, it could be if you have an open air filter, it could be the timing chain. But it's only on first too. I mean, maybe you could ask them to check your timing, but I mean, if the chain is just stretch, it's hard. They wouldn't know if it's the turbo. I would say if you have an open air filter, close it up. If you still have your OEM one, put the OEM air filter back on and see if you can still hear it. Then you'll know. Another thing, actually, if it is the turbo, check your turbo inlet pipe. if it's cracked, that's why you're hearing the turbo. That would be like the only, because the boost pipe is rubber, so you wouldn't have an issue there. Yeah, check your turbo inlet pipe. That thing's plastic, like mine cracked on the F30. It cracked. You know, it's just like, it's thin plastic, goes through a bunch of heat cycles. It's eventually going to happen. It would be like if you spilled a little bit of water on your desk. If you leave it there long enough, it's going to evaporate. These pipes are kind of the same thing. They'll eventually break. Oh, look, okay. MKD got some on it. I'm pretty sure it's the turbo. Mine would whistle, and I was worried after upgrading the air intake, it became more consistent. The sounds, but don't worry. There it is. Soul Slinger, what's up, man? How's it going, man? Hope you had a good day at work. Man, dude, you've been slaying it. Like your commute is like another shift. I hope you're doing good, man. Hope all is well. Glad that you made it today. Okay. All right. I'll let MKD and Jake, I'll let you guys take this conversation away. Okay, so this thing seems like it's happening at first and second, potentially. All right, awesome. I think you guys are right on top of this. Let's see here. Hope you guys don't mind me being a little nosy here. Even third. Okay, well, if anybody is having these issues, it looks like they're getting to the root cause of this right now. MKD. Sorry to hear that. Makes me feel better. Okay, yeah, about the lip, yeah. It happens. I mean, the good thing about souvenir lips is that they come with the guards already. So it's not like an additional purchase that you have to make. It just comes with the lip when you make the purchase. So I did scrape, but at least it was just on the guards. It happens. It's something like us as drivers like will cringe over, but then when we get out of the car, there's barely any damage. So it's a good kind of thing. It's not really noticeable, but it's noticeable when you're driving. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, Jake, you're saying that you already run the OEM filter. And the next time you go in, you might just change the charge pipe for preventive maintenance. Yep. Yeah. Definitely. Like the charge pipe and the boost pipe, those are two that will usually go. Eventually, you have the car long enough. If the car's been through enough heat cycles, it'll happen. So I would say, yeah, it's better for those things. Sometimes like leaks, like the oil filter housing gasket and the valve cover, the oil pan gasket, I'll say wait until it starts to leak a little bit before you replace it, because the leaks usually happen slowly, progressively. Like if you start to see a leak, you can wipe it up. And then maybe it doesn't come back for like a couple weeks or a month, depending on how much you drive. And then once you start to like wipe it off and then it starts to appear again by like the end of the week, then it's time to take it in. But the charge pipe and the boost pipe, just because like when they go bad, like it's absolutely bad. And eventually you will need to replace it. I'd say it's better just to replace it, because unlike the gaskets that will eventually go bad again, if you replace it with an aluminum charge pipe or an aluminum turbo inlet pipe, it should never break again. So there's no real detriment to like doing it early. It isn't like you change the valve cover, your oil filter housing gasket every 10,000 miles because it's going to go bad another 70,000. Like you want to get the life out of those gaskets. Once you put in the pipes, they should never really need to be replaced again. Jake, another question. When I reverse, then drive forward, I get 2 clicks, one from each caliper in the front. Mechanic said it was normal also. Anyone else have that experience? I have not, but I'll start paying attention. I'll admit I haven't paid attention. It also hasn't been an issue to the point where it drew my attention, so I can't speak to that. But we have the expert here. Soul Singer could be throwout bearings dealing with first gear stress. Yeah, for those of you guys don't know, Soul Singer is our resident professional mechanic in the chat. And I mean that in all literal aspects. Not for just for cars, planes and boats too. So I'm happy that he's here, and thanks for filling in where I fall short as always. Peter, how much is your insurance on your salvage? It's like $40 a month. Yeah, $40 a month. I think I tell them that I drive. What's my commute now? It's like 30. So 60 times, you only really need to go office like 3 or 4 times a week. So let's say 240. Let's round it to 300 for a week times 4, 1,200. So basically, like 1,200 miles a month is basically what I drive. I think that's what I told them. So 1,200 miles. I don't really have any accidents or anything like that, or tickets. So $40. $40 with Geico. Not sponsored, but if you're shopping around, that's where I'm getting the $40 from. Soul Singer. Clicks might be the brake pads adjusting directions. They float in the brackets. All right. I didn't know that. Change the gaskets already because of leaking too. Okay. Pilar. Lowering the car helps with body roll, better aero, and enhanced feedback of the vehicle. This is why I lowered my MT35i with sport springs running 245 front and 255 rear. Fenders rolled, no rubbing, without camber. Right on. Yep, absolutely agree. Lowering the car does all of those things. And 245 front. Yeah, you'll need to roll. Right on. And no camber. Thanks for sharing your setup. Appreciate it. So anybody who's looking to lower the car and have these dimensions, take a screenshot. This is kind of what you'll need. Yeah, I mean, even from like car to car, it's going to be different because, different tire manufacturers, like a 245 is going to be different from brand to brand because tread wear is going to be different, and tread wear isn't symmetrical. So like, say like, if brand says like they have a tread wear of 50 from Continental is not going to be the same from 50 from Michelin. It's going to be different. However, 50 within the Michelin spec is always going to be more than 40 within Michelin, right? So within brand, tread wears mean something. When you're referencing between different brands, tread wear doesn't mean much, right? Because it's whatever they want to measure their tread wear at. Some companies like America's Tire will let you, or they'll give you the overall diameter of the tire, which is helpful. Andy, love your videos. One stop shop for the M235i content. All right on. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I wish more people made content on the 2 series as a whole. So until we can encourage some other people to start jumping in the fire, I'll be here. Jake, thanks, Soul Slinger. Yeah. Yep, Soul Slinger's the guy. Andy, any plans of making a coolant pump video, coolant ground screw video? I haven't had the need to do that. I kind of just replaced my coolant not too long ago. maybe if something comes out. The thing is, like with these electric ones, like that's another one. It's tough because they do have a service life, and when they go bad, they go bad. It's not. It's not like the old ones, like on the E36, where you can swap it out for one with a metal impaler, and it just kind of, it's not electronically controlled. It works. So I will have to look into like what is the service life of that, and then when I'm close. So like if, for example, the service life of the pump is like 150, like when I get to like 120, I'll consider it. If the service life of those pumps are like, 90, I'll consider it when I'm close to like 80, 85. I think one of the things where like I'm willing to get a little bit closer to the service interval of whatever part that I'm on is because I pretty much only do things locally. If I were to take my car on road trips or long drives, like I drive an hour or 2 hours, like Soul Slinger does, I would probably do it a little bit closer because I'm not, one, going to be close to my house, or two, not close to my shop. So here I can run that risk because I'm either going to be close to home or I'm going to be close to my shop. I'm usually commuting within the range, right? So I'm pretty safe to run it pretty close to the service intervals. Right on. AD, thoughts on lowering F22 220i X drive. So if you look at, let me see here. This video is the one that we just did the V1s on. Let's see here. This one required no Fender roll, no camber. So this X drive has V1s. The height that I set it to for the KWs, it's near max. Like I gave myself like a few spins of leeway from the top. So I set it to like the optimal height, right? And then just to be sure, I think I went down like 2 spins from whatever the max was, just so that I'm for sure in that range. That car currently is fit with 18s by 8.5 with a 35 offset on 225 40 Michelin all season 4s. No rubbing, no clearance issues. It's actually pretty good. So hope that answers that question. Stage 2 custom 93 tuned by Navardi. Oh, right on. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the only concern with the 4-cylinder engines is that timing chain. So long as the tune, I mean, let us know how you like it. But usually when it comes to like the 4-cylinders, it's like you're going to give up some power for more reliability. I'm not sure exactly how they tune it, but like some tunes are designed to like make the car more reliable while adding a little bit of power. Some cars, the internals are so robust, you can just kind of like full steam ahead when it comes to power. The N20, N26, you can't really do that. Even if you do the upgraded timing chain and timing chain guide, like it's still a plastic guide. Let's see here. Beat on the car, use liquid moly 540, 5,000 interval. Okay, right on. Yeah, use that FCP Euro warranty. Let's see here. 18 by 8.5, 45 offset, squared arc 8 soon with PS4s, 235, 40, 18. Ooh. Be careful. You're going to have to do some adjustments. If you're, yeah. Well, I think it'd be tough. So I'm running nearly the same setup. So my offset is a 35, and I'm running that same size tire, but in the all-season 4s, which is a taller tire, because generally all-season tires from brand to brand is taller than their summer tire counterpart, which is what you're getting. However, where I'm rubbing is like where the bumper and the fender meet, where that little plastic adjoining clip is. Because of your higher offset, yeah, you're probably still expect a fender roll. And then depends on what system that you're running to lower your car. Let's see, did you include that in here? Here, like it's tough. The 2 Series, we have very little leeway when it comes to this stuff. If you do this, you're going to want to do coilovers or adjustable springs. You're going to want some adjustability in there, because if you get lowering springs with one height, it might not clear. So just be careful. Yeah. Depending too, you might have inner clearance. Test fit it. Yep. Don't just throw it on, like do a test fit in the front. But yeah, I mean, once you have it and once you figure it out, I mean, please come back and let us know how it all worked out or how you got it to work. Peter, do you have any desire to get the 240i with the B58? Let's say you find a good deal and you are in the right financial circumstance. In all honesty, I would go for the Supra. Not necessarily because I like it's fine. Like, the reason why I would go with the Supra is because it still has the B58. Part of me doesn't want to be asked to take people to the airport and like put people in the car. So the Supra, like 2-seater, perfect excuse. But more importantly than that is, as far as content creation, chassis stuff aside, or like chassis stuff in mind, if I stick with the F22 chassis, I'm not really doing anything different. I'm not addressing a different audience base. If I get the Supra with the B58, people will still come to the channel for all the chassis related things like suspension and, you know, wheels, tires, fitment, stuff like that. They'll still come in, like hood fitment, things like that. However, they can easily translate what I'm doing to the car engine wise, even if I have a Supra. However, I will then also attract the Supra people because I'm doing chassis specific things for their car. So it helps me double dip a little bit in that aspect. So that's why I would lean towards it. And the reason why I wouldn't go with the 3 Series is because I'm already using my dad's 328i that has the N20 engine. So I'm addressing the 4-cylinder base with that car. And again, I don't want to get the same chassis because suspension, wheels, tires, all that stuff is essentially going to be the same. I want to be able to touch a different audience base with an engine that is covered in these cars, right? So what I'm saying is, I would want the B58, but in a different chassis. I would want the S65 in a different chassis, just so that, you know, I have all of the chassis lined up, but the engines are slightly different. So even if somebody's like, I have a 240i, they can still relate for all the chassis stuff. They're just going to see the engine stuff on a Supra, which I'm pretty sure that if you really need to get some work done, you'll kind of like, yeah, it's not exactly the same car, but it's close enough, right? That's what I would do. AD, nice. Talked to Apex and they said 5mm spacer front will prevent rubbing, optional 5 or 3 rear. Yeah, Apex is really good with their fitment guides. They put a lot of R&D into like what will and will not fit. However, they've only done that with they've done that for the wheels and maybe like 1 or 2 different tires. They haven't done it for all the tires. So I would say still test fit, right? Don't like just drop it off at the mechanic and say like throw this in. Like I would say have the stuff at home if you want. If you have a buddy who has like some like used spacers like that are of this size, like ask like, hey, can you bring your car over and I can just do a test fit and then test it out. That way, you know, it doesn't hurt to say like buy 5 and, you know, a set of 5 millimeters and 3 millimeters. You have yours still boxed up, but you use your buddies to do the test fit. There you determine which one that you really need, and then you return the one that you don't. At least that way you have it on hand, you know it's going to fit, and then you go from there. Stock suspension currently. Okay, it'll fit. It'll fit. You should have enough space. You might not rub. You might rub a little bit in just that little corner that kind of pops out from the inside. So yeah, but if you do lower it, it's going to be an aggressive setup. So I would say if you lower your car in the future, get coilovers, don't do springs. You will need the adjustability. Went through the setup with them, so it's all good. Okay. Yeah, more than happy. Like I said, just when you come back, let us know exactly how it turned out, so that you know, people who are looking to do the same thing as you can follow that rubric. I gotta pass out. Y'all have a great week and be safe out there. You too, Soul Singer. Glad to have you stop by, and thanks again for always coming in clutch. Peter, that makes perfect sense in your case as a YouTuber. Supra would be the car I'd get if I had the budget to fit it. Currently looking at M235 I's with 50 to 100K miles on them. Yeah, the N55 is like really reliable. The other thing too is like the B58, because that's like when like the Supra specifically is the BMW Toyota collaboration. And if I'm not mistaken, BMW, like the collaboration was BMW said, we will, for your Supra chassis, we will give you our engine. However, we want something in reverse. We want something where we provide the chassis and you provide the engine. And so, you know, Toyota said, fine. You know, I think they did something along the lines of like they took some of the Prius technology and gave it to them for their X5 models in order to have like a gas efficient SUV. If I'm not mistaken, that was a trade-off. That was BMW getting the engine for their chassis, while the Supra is reverse. They gave the engine for the chassis. However, because it's a collaboration, both parties, even though that in this case of the Supra, Toyota was not necessarily the engine donor, they still were involved with the engine tuning, mechanics, reliability. Like they were still involved, right? And so the B58 is almost the inflection point where BMW engines got really reliable. The M engines, even the 4 Series engine, that's where BMW got some of the insight on how to make a really reliable engine. Now, the issues that the B58s that you'll probably see that come up, it's one, when people were tuning them, the tuners, it was like their first time tuning them. So they were kind of tuning them out of the parameter. 2, the weak point of the B58 is the cooling system. So like the plastic radiator hoses, the plastic, face it, the plastic everything when it comes to cooling was the issue. You replace that stuff out for like silicone hoses, metal flanges, all of those things. The B58 is then reliable. It's more reliable than the N55, you know? So that's where I would say like N55, B58, and up and up and up, the engines get more and more reliable. Pilar, my car would rub where the bumper and fender met, shaved it a little, going with the line of the bumper, and can't even tell I shaved it by anyone. Running 245 front, you need 5mm spacers. Okay, right on. Yeah, thanks for sharing. All right. And then I didn't, sorry, Peter. As far as 50K to 100K, I would say you're going to probably see like low 20s, high teens for that car. Just to give you a reference, like my car is salvaged. I got it for less than 30,000 miles on it. And I paid like less than 20,000 and I had to ship it here. Shipping the car was like $500. I think I got it for like 19,800 all in all, not including like registering it to my state, but just the car shipped to my doorstep was like 19,800. I'm in the position to not immediately need to buy a car. If you were me, would you wait a few years for the M240i and the general car market to go down? Yeah, I mean, you can look up the place that I bought my car at. It's called Auto Savvy. Again, not sponsored or anything. What? Their warranty is better than before. Before they used to give a 3-month warranty or a 30,000 or a 3,000 mile warranty, whatever came first. This is better. Like this comes, yes, their cars are salvaged. So, it's going to be hard to resell, whatever. But if you plan to keep the car for a while, this is incredible. 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty. That's legit. I haven't shopped around in there for a while, but man, I mean, that's pretty cool. If that comes like with all of their cars, like no extra purchase necessary, like mine did, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah. Honestly, even if the market's high, sometimes you'll find a deal. Sometimes you'll find a dealership that really needs to sell a car. They need to get it off the lot. Maybe their financial situation, they really need cash. So I would say just kind of keep poking around. Like look around the market. If you see something, take it. If you see an M235i close to like 50,000 and you see it in that 15 to 18 good condition, they upgraded good things or like maintenance related things. Like for example, they did the charge pipe, boost pipe, intercooler. All of that stuff is plastic. Yes, it's good that they upgraded it. If they got rid of the plastic coolant flange, that's a good upgrade. If they did the oil filter housing gasket, all of those things are good. Don't be too enthralled with things like downpipe, stage 2 tune, exhaust. Kind of that indicates that they drove the car really hard. If they have those things on and they didn't do anything maintenance related, I would say kind of steer away from it. But if they did charge pipe, boost pipe, charge pipe, turbo inlet pipe, and intercooler, like the things that are plastic and are going to break eventually, those are things to look for that are good. Yeah, so just keep your nose in the market. Check out Auto Savvy. If nothing is to your liking, just keep waiting. If you don't need a car, yeah, there's no rush. The B58, you're gonna just want to make sure that they did the cooling stuff if you're paying a little bit more. If not, if you get a good deal, there's no problem with taking the car for a little bit less and then using the extra money that you didn't spend on upgrading the cooling stuff right away. Again, when it comes to the B58, when I say, like, if you buy it, just upgrade that stuff right away because usually you don't need to replace it, right? If you replace a metal flange or if you replace a plastic hose for a silicone one, you usually don't need to replace those ever again. It's the gaskets that I recommend just waiting until it starts to leak a little bit more, then replace it because you're going to have to replace it again. Let's see here. Peter, that's all. Thanks for the big insight. Have a good evening. Fan of your channel. Thank you. Yep. Happy to help. And look forward to seeing what you get. So I think that is it for us today. Thank you, everybody who came and hung out. If you guys have any other suggestions for topics, feel free to send it to me over at VroomTuber on Instagram, TikTok. And I hope all of you have a good evening, and I'll see all of you next week.